Having two clear sightings of UFO phenomena in a single night is remarkable enough in itself. But being told beforehand that UFOs would be there at a precise time by a local spiritual teacher makes the story far stranger, because that is exactly what happened to me. In this video, I'm going to share that experience again. I briefly mentioned it on my other channel, Power and Presence, and ask a provocative question. Is there a connection between UFO or UAP sightings and the non-local or extended mind? In other words, do people ever experience seemingly telepathic communications with UFOs or their occupants? And if so, what are the implications? My interest in UFOs and altered states of consciousness really accelerated when I moved to Coffs Harbour on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, Australia, in my mid-20s. As a kind of experiment, I began placing myself into deep, dreamlike, meditative states and asking questions internally, waiting for impressions or answers to arise from my subconscious, or perhaps elsewhere. The responses often came in the form of vivid inner imagery, songs, words, voices, and occasional impressions that felt like brief contact with other minds or intelligences. These latter experiences would typically snap me back into ordinary awareness because they felt so startling. I discovered that I possessed a latent capacity for non-ordinary states of consciousness, much to my surprise. Yet, historically and cross-culturally, such experiences are not really unusual at all. Intuition, visions, symbolic dreams, and altered states appear throughout human history and across many traditional cultures. Around that time, I encountered a woman named Leslie Halverson, who would become central to my UFO experience. One day, I noticed a small sign outside a shop in downtown Coffs Harbour that read, "Psychic readings, $10. I'd never had a psychic reading before, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside, I met Leslie, who was a warm and friendly woman with a gentle smile. I don't remember much about their reading itself, except that she also mentioned that she conducted weekly meditation classes at a home just outside of town. So I decided to attend. Usually, perhaps 10 or 15 people gathered there. Looking back, it was my first real introduction to people with strongly alternative or holistic worldviews. Many seemed kind and sincere, though some of the stories they told me struck me as difficult to believe. I remained curious but cautious. Then one evening after the meditation session had ended, she told the group that the previous night she had experienced many UFO dreams involving, UFOs, and that on the last occasion she had such dreams, UFO reports appeared all over the news the following day. She then added, "If you go out tonight at about 2 a.m., I think you might see something." Naturally, this sounded rather crazy to me. Besides the UFO references, how could she possibly know the time of their appearance? But despite my skepticism, I thought the opportunity was too interesting to ignore. So that night, I went to bed around 11 o'clock and set my alarm for approximately 1:45 a.m. It was May 17, 1994, or May 18 after midnight, early winter in Australia, and pleasantly cool. I know because the details are clearly recorded in my dream diary at the time. I'll also share these images of the photographs from the diary. At around 1:50 a.m. I stepped outside. The moment I looked upward, I was astonished to see a large luminous white object, roughly orb-like, moving silently across from south to north. This is how I saw it at the time. Slightly offshore and over the ocean, which lay only a few hundred meters east of where I was standing, although the ocean wasn't visible from my driveway. The object possessed a shimmering corona all around it. It moved smoothly, steadily, and in a straight line. I would estimate that it was perhaps about a kilometre away, though judging the distance of glowing objects at night is notoriously difficult. There was absolutely no sound. This image you're now seeing is my recreation using modern image generation software. My astonishment came from the fact that I had never seen anything remotely like it before, and never have since. Well, not unless you count what happened less than an hour later. The object soon disappeared over the nearby apartments just to my left, because the trajectory was relatively low in the sky. I suppose, 35 degrees? So I immediately ran down to the beach to try to spot it again. For perhaps an hour, I walked excitedly up and down the shoreline, searching the sky, but saw nothing more. But then it was approaching 3 a.m, so I decided I'd better head home and get some sleep. But just as I was about to enter the doorway of my apartment, I looked up one final time, just like this. And there, standing in exactly the same spot where I'd seen the orb an hour earlier, I witnessed another astonishing phenomenon, almost directly overhead. This time it appeared to be a series of glowing orange discs, perhaps 15 to 20 of them, angled in a double V formation. One V nested inside the other, moving southward along the coastline, slightly inland. Again, there was absolutely no sound. The image you're now seeing is another Gen AI-assisted recreation, although I had to manually draw the lights because the software struggled to reproduce the precise geometry I requested. You can also see this crude drawing I made in my diary at the time. The lights appeared to be relatively high in the sky. It's possible that this was one larger object rather than multiple separate objects. Perhaps it was a triangular craft with rows of lights underneath it. I can't be certain, but my immediate impression was that I was observing a flotilla of glowing orange discs. Now, one of the advantages of being alive today is having advanced AI search systems available. So, while preparing this video, I conducted 2 separate deep research inquiries using ChatGPT Pro to see whether I could locate related reports from media, journals, books, etc. from that period. The first search focused on the 2-week period surrounding my own sighting in May 1994. Unfortunately, that revealed little evidence of comparable phenomena on Australia's east coast during that specific period, and only a handful of loosely comparable cases internationally. However, according to a 2016 report by Australian UFO researcher Keith Basterfield, published through Project 1947, this was also a period when the Royal Australian Air Force had largely ceased formal UFO investigations, and Australian archival systems for such reports appear to have become fragmented or poorly maintained. The surviving record may therefore be incomplete. The second search examined historical cases resembling what I observed: luminous orb-like objects with radiant coronas and silent orange formations resembling nested V-shapes. The orb phenomenon proved much more common historically. One of the strongest comparable cases was the 1982 Hesdalen sightings in Norway, documented in the ongoing Project Hesdalen Scientific Archive. Witnesses described brilliant white luminous spheres surrounded by glowing halos, moving silently and performing unusual maneuvers. Some observers even described the light collapsing inward into a brighter inner core. Again, the images shown here are recreated with Gen AI and may differ from what witnesses actually saw. Reports resembling the nested V formation are much rarer. One comparable case appeared in a 2009 witness report archived by the National UFO Reporting Center, where witnesses described a silent orange V-shaped object containing smaller glowing V-shapes within the larger structure. Another interesting analogue appeared in Richard Hall's 1964 book, The UFO Evidence, which summarized the famous 1958 Monon Railroad case in Indiana. In that incident, train workers reported multiple luminous objects arranged in an open V formation with no illuminated rear section, suggesting separate objects rather than a single craft. Now, naturally, people ask me what those objects I witnessed in 1994 might actually have been. And of course, I've asked myself the same question many times over. The popular explanation among UFO enthusiasts would probably be that they were literally alien spacecraft from beyond our solar system. Personally, I suspect one or both of the phenomena may indeed have been non-human in origin. Perhaps both objects were part of the same expedition. Of course, equally they could have been AI-driven vehicles rather than containing biological beings. The main skeptical argument against the alien spacecraft hypothesis in general is that interstellar distances are so vast that practical travel between stars becomes effectively impossible. Even Proxima Centauri, the nearest star system, lies extraordinarily far away. At half the speed of light, a one-way journey would still take more than 8 years. Now, This episode of the Other Singularity is not specifically about resolving the interstellar travel problem, but there are reasons to be cautious about declaring such things impossible. Modern science is only a few centuries old, lest we forget, while the universe is perhaps 14 billion years old. There may be civilizations millions or even billions of years ahead of us technologically, with knowledge that would make us look like ants building a nest and congratulating themselves that they are the high point of cosmic awareness. There are thinkers such as Jacques Vallée, Jacques Vallée, and John Mack who have speculated that deeper structures of space-time or consciousness may somehow be involved in the manifestation of movement of UFO phenomena. In theory, these might help explain how space and time might be less of a barrier to space travel and interstellar communication than our dominant science presupposes. One of my favourite historical examples here is Lord Kelvin, who declared near the end of the 19th century that heavier-than-air human flight was impossible. Yet, only a few years later, in 1903, the Wright brothers achieved the first powered heavier-than-air flight, and just 66 years after that, humanity landed on the moon. Why was Lord Kelvin wrong? From our modern vantage point, the answer is obvious. His understanding of physics and aeronautics was incomplete. And who amongst us can confidently say our present understanding of physics and cosmology is comprehensive? One scientifically trained friend has suggested the first object I saw may have been the space shuttle re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. But neither American shuttle was in orbit at the time. I checked that. Further, the object did not appear especially distant and clearly resembled a luminous sphere with a corona around it. It bore little resemblance to footage of the space shuttle re-entry. Another possibility is ball lightning. The first object did superficially resemble some images of ball lightning I've seen. However, ball lightning is generally described as moving erratically and often shifting shape, whereas this object moves smoothly and steadily across the horizon. The second phenomenon also raises difficulties for conventional explanations. One possibility is some form of military aircraft or experimental stealth technology, although this was 1994. But if it were a stealth craft, why would it display 15 to 20 glowing circular lights underneath it? The whole point of stealth technology is concealment, not target practice for enemy anti-aircraft guns. So, my own conclusion, cautiously stated, is that these phenomena represented genuinely anomalous aerial events. The fact that my meditation teacher effectively foretold their appearance, literally referring to UFOs and even specifying about 2 a.m., is another reason I lean toward that interpretation. This leads into one of the broader themes I'm exploring on this channel, the possibility of a deep connection between UFO phenomena, alien life, and consciousness. After all, dreams, intuitions, telepathic impressions, altered states, and strange forms of communication appear repeatedly in reports of encounters and experiences with UFO or alleged alien contacts. A famous example is the September 1994 Ariel School UFO incident in Zimbabwe, just 4 months after my own sighting, where more than 60 school children reported witnessing one or more strange craft near their school playground. Several of the children later claimed they experienced what felt like telepathic communication or direct mental impressions from the humanoid beings associated with the phenomenon. Some described receiving symbolic or emotional messages concerning humanity, technology, and environmental destruction, not through spoken language, but as immediate intuitive knowing. Researchers such as John Mack have considered these reports significant because of the consistency and emotional sincerity of many of the children's testimonies. Now, I'm not claiming definitive understanding of the apparent correlation between Leslie Halverson's dreams and my own witnessing of UAP phenomena at the time she predicted they would appear. But my intuitive feeling is that somehow, within the greater scheme of things, I was meant to see those objects. I also believe there was likely some form of connection between Leslie's consciousness and the phenomena themselves. That conclusion may sound extraordinary, but she correctly identified both the type of phenomenon, UFOs, and the approximate time, 2 a.m. And I've had various meditative experiences myself which are indicative of such communications. But those stories are for another day. Over the years, I've heard many other strange UAP stories from people in Australia, particularly in remote areas and open landscapes. At another meditation centre in Newcastle about 2 years later, a woman told me that while driving along a country road at night with a friend who was a practicing clairvoyant, again, several glowing orbs descended and began circling around their vehicle. She described the orbs as perhaps basketball-sized. Yet what disturbed her most was that her clairvoyant friend behaved as though nothing unusual was happening and refused to discuss the event at all. Throughout my life, I've met people who simply do not fit comfortably within our current understanding of what human beings are supposed to be. Some seem to possess unusually expanded capacities of awareness, intuition, or perception. Yet most will likely live and die without recognition of their gifts, because our culture possesses very little framework for understanding such individuals. Just think, if Einstein had been born into a pre-industrial tribe 5,000 years ago, his genius would have passed unrecorded, because there simply would not have been the cultural structures and institutions to permit it to flourish, or be recorded for that matter. This is one reason I started this YouTube channel and why I'm writing a book of the same name, The Other Singularity. I believe that one day, perhaps sooner than we think, the kinds of abilities and people I'm talking about will be taken far more seriously. And if that happens, it may herald a very different future from the one usually presented by our dominant media and institutions. What does all this imply? Let us suppose that people like Leslie Halverson are genuinely connected in some way with UFO or UAP phenomena, or perhaps with non-local consciousness structures associated with intelligences either on Earth or beyond it. If there are genuinely non-local human connections with UAP or alien consciousness, then interstellar information exchange may not depend entirely upon physical proximity or conventional communications systems. It could instead occur through intuition, dreams, visions, symbolic impressions, or direct thought-like experiences. Consciousness itself may not be confined within isolated biological brains, but may operate through forms of connection that transcend ordinary space and time. This possibility challenges the assumptions of skeptics such as Carl Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who've argued that the distances between stars make meaningful contact between civilizations effectively impossible. If non-local consciousness exists, then communication may not be constrained in the ways we currently assume. More radically, non-locality itself may form part of whatever communication or travel architecture advanced intelligences employ. If so, humanity may already be engaged in subtle forms of contact with non-human intelligence. Under the traditional worldview, first contact is imagined as a Star Trek scenario involving spacecraft crossing interstellar distances. But if consciousness can operate non-locally, then first contact may already be occurring through subtler channels of mind, intuition, symbolism, and perception. So, if these ideas interest you, please do like this video and subscribe to join me on this journey. I suspect the future is going to be quite a ride. I'm Marcus D. Anthony. See you again soon in the futures.